Okay. Okay. So there we go. Okay. So we are on. Yeah. Yeah. Welcome. Halab. Halab. Yeah. Halab. Okay. All right. There's either halab or aram sova. Yeah. One or the other. Okay. So good Shabbos to everybody. I see Joe is on with us. Thanks. And you can hear us now. I think you got your second audio in. And this Shabbat, we have a decent TV screen set up, but my Windows, in its wisdom, updated their systems yesterday, tied up my computer for an hour, and as of today, the audio on YouTube doesn't work with the new Windows system. So it says I have to shut down, restart, and we've got to go ahead with the service. So we're not going to do the videos. I'm going to sing, and you're going to sing with me. I apologize. So I was going to start with a Matovu and Elohai. Well, I do know Matovu beautifully, so we can sing along. So page 2, and we're going to play it like we're going to play it this way. Okay, I'm going to put me on speaker view, and I'm going to do. Okay. And okay. Well, let's go ahead. Oh, let me go back to this. There we go. How do I close this? Close. There we go. Now let's go full screen. Okay. Technology, the wonders of technology. We lived very well when we were in the caves. I guess before technology, we only had to deal with cave bears. Otherwise, everything was fine. And in the cave, the air conditioning was good. The heating was good, right? You didn't have to worry about the electricity running out. Okay, so we'll make do with this. So those of you who are following online, we're in the prayer book on page 2 with the Matovu, page 2. And let's all join in. Since I can't get the audio working on this, I'm going to just have to sing and sing along with me as loud as you can. Matovu Alecha Yaakov Mishkenatecha Yisrael Matovu Alecha Yaakov Mishkenatecha Yisrael V'nibro chastecha avo beitecha eshtachavecha kachecha and the last line of this, Vani tefillati lecha Adonai Heitzon Elohim berov chasecha Aneni bemet yishecha. Let's continue with the morning blessings. And you can recite with me or just say amen at the end on page 10. Baruch atah Adonai l'cholam asher natan sefchi v'nya lavchin ben yom u'ben layla. Amen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai l'cholam shasani b'tzamo. Amen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai l'cholam shasani Yisrael. Amen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai l'cholam shasani ben chorin.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai l'cholam Pokech Ivrim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Mechalam Malbish Arumim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Mechalam Matir Asurim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Mechalam Zokef Kefufim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Mechalam Rak Aretz Al Hamayim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Mechalam Shasali Kol Tzorki.
Amen.
Baruch atah Mechalam Hamechin Mitzadei Gaver. Baruch
Amen.
atah Mechalam Ozeser Bigvura. Baruch atah Mechalam Otiseh B'tifara. Baruch atah Mechalam Hanoten Leif Koach.
Amen.
And we're going to continue. Go into the that I have to figure out. 1 second. to page 54. We're going to open up with the opening introduction to the to the Psukei de Zimra, the Psalms, with Baruch She'amar. Praise be He who spoke and the world came into being. Praise be He. Baruch Osev Reshit, Baruch Omer V'Oseb. Blessed be the one who creates, who makes creation. Blessed be the one who says and commits and fulfills what He promises. Baruch Shama V'Yalam, Baruch Hu, Baruch Osev Reshit, Baruch Omer V'Oseh, Baruch Gozer Kayem, Baruch Menachem Al Haaretz, Baruch Menachem Al Habriot, Baruch Meshalem Sachatov L'Rayav, Baruch Hayla Advakayam L'Netzach, Baruch Poneh Matzir, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Hatan Mechalam, Ha'el Ha'al Rahaman Hamrachem, Hamhalal B'Fiamo, Mishubach M'Farad B'Shon Chasidav Avadav, ובשירי דוד עבדך נלך עד נלהנו בשפחות וזמירות גדל חונשבך חונפוארך ונזכיר שמך נמליך המכן אלינו יחיד חי עולמים מלך משובח מפאר עד שמו הגדול ברוך אתה אדוני מלך מעולם ותשבחות. All right, let's go to the Ashrei. Might as well do a lot of joining in since I'm not going to have these beautiful musical compositions. Will be our musical composition here. We respond. Ashrei Yoshvei, page 80. Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha Od Yalu Chasela Asher Ha'am Shekachalo Asher Ha'am Sharanai Lahav Hila LeDavid Mimcha Melech Vavachashim Chalil Aba'ed Chalim Abachach Velashim Chalim Aba'ed Gadol Aranai Mecholam Me'od Ligoto Ein Cheker Dor L'Dor Shabach Masecha Gorotecha Yigidu Hadai Kevodo Decha Divrei Niflotecha Sicha Bezus Naratecha Yimeru Glotcha Yisaprena Zeched Avtucha Yabiya B'tzidkatcha Yiranenu Anu Brachum Aranai Elcha Paim Gol Chased Tov Aranai L'Kol Brachamav Kol Masav Yeduchana Kol Masav Kevod Machutcha Yomeru Gvorotcha Yedaberu Nadir Adam Gvorota Machuto Machutcha Machut Kol Lamim Shaltecha B'chol Dor V'Dor Inei Chalecha Yisaberu V'ata Notein Lahem Et Achlam B'ito Tzadik Aranai B'chol Derachav B'chasid B'chol Ma'asav
Double P.
Etzoni Rab Yaseh Bet Shabbatam Yishma V'Yashiem Tila Tanenda Derpi V'vorek K'vasashim Kachelam V'ed
ואנחנו נבורך יא מעתה ועד עולם.
אנחנו נבורך יא מעתה ועד עולם. Hallelujah. And let's go to page 88. We'll sing the 88. We'll sing Hallelujah. Hallelujah chorus. Hallelujah, 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 big Murata, hallelujah, hallelujah, Kerogolo, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, B'teika shofar. Hallelujah, hallelujah, B'neve v'chinor. Hallelujah, 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 b'tov umachol. Hallelujah, hallelujah, b'minim ve'ugav. Hallelujah, 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 b'tzitzilei shama. Hallelujah, hallelujah, b'tzitzilei truah. Kol hanshamate haleya, Kol hanshama tehaleya, kol hanshama tehaleya, hallelujah. Kol hanshama tehaleya, hallelujah.
Baruch Adonai
Breath.
V'yom
Praise to God. Hallelujah. All right, now we're going to go ahead. I think we'll survive this Shabbat without the videos. Although I had something special for the presentation. Huh? That's right. That's right. Thank you. Thank you. You're right. No, it's Windows 10 updated and killed YouTube. That's what it did. They killed the audio on YouTube. And so it needs to restart and restart till it figures out how to do the audio, because the difference was a major update and they didn't know what they're doing. Maybe it's because Bill Gates is splitting. We don't know. We don't know. We're going to ask Jeff Bezos. I'm going to ask Jeff Bezos what happens. I don't know. Page 336. 336. So much for joking. 36. So much for joking at the expense of others. Okay. Shochenad marom bekadosh shemo bechatura tzadikim baronai naisharim nava tehila befi yisharim tithalam uvdivrei tzadikim titbara uveshon chasidim titromam uvekeref kehedoshim tihit kahadash ובמקלות ובבות עמך בית ישראל. שכן חובת כל יצורים לפניך אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו להודות לשבח לפאר לרומם להדל לברך להלל ולקנס הכל דברי שירות ותשבחות דוד בן ישי עבדך משיחך נשתבח שמך לעד מלכנו ברכות להודות מעתה ביד עולם ברוך אדוני אל מלכותו בתשבחות אל להודות אדון הנפלאות הבוחר בשירי זמרה מלך חי עולמים. And we're going to continue with the blessing for the morning lights, page 340. Baruch atah mechalam yotzerar v'choshech osa shel mored hakol. Well, now we go back to singing El Adon our old regular way. So I won't throw in all these different offbeat tunes that I've been doing. I'll do it. And let's go ahead. El Adon al kol hamasim baruch umorach bepikon shama yolo v'tuvo malei olam datu tvuna shovavim oto amid gae al chayot hakodesh v'neder bechavod hamerkava zechut u'mishol lifnei chisol Chesed v'rachamim lifnei kavodo tovim meorot shebara Eloheinu Yitzaram b'dad b'vinal chasker Go'ah gvura natan b'hem eliyot moshlim b'kerev tevel meleim ziv u'fikim noga zivam b'chol ha'olam smechim b'tzeitam sasim b'vam osim b'maretzon konam b'chavod notnim lishmo Salaverina lezechem achuto kara lashemesh ma'yezachora vehitkin tzurat avana shevach notnim lokotzeva amarom tiferet ugdula srafim yofanim b'chayot hakodesh. We continue page 244. 344 in the middle of the 344 in the middle of the top paragraph, or it's actually the second paragraph, the vision of the angels according to Ezekiel and to Isaiah, giving praise of God. Kulam ovim, kulam berurim, kulam gibor, kulam osim b'yiruyot son kodam, kulam potchim et pihem b'kedushat Torah, shiro v'zimra, vorchim, shabchim, farim, maritzim, magchim, mamlichim, shem ha'el, hamelech, hagadol, hagibor, v'hanora, kahadoshu, kulam mikablim aleim, o machot shamayim ze mizeh, notnim reshut zeh lazeh, להקדיש ליוצרם בנחת ובסבנים הקדושה, כלם ככרם בירה, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאו, בארץ כבודו. ופנים וחיות הקודש, ברעש כרבת נצית לעומת שרפים, תם שבחים ואומרים, ברוך כבוד אדוני, בימי אור חדש, על ציון תאיר, ונזכה כל המאור ליאורו, ברוך אתה יוצר המאורות. And 346, we'll sing this together, the whole paragraph all the way through. Great love have you shown us in the teachings of the Torah, great mercy and kindness. May we have the wisdom and understanding to accept and adhere to your teachings. May we then be merited to be gathered from the four corners of the earth because of you who chose his people with Israel with love. Rabba haftanu Adonai Eloheinu Chem lagedol v'terachamata aleinu Avinu Malkeinu Avur Avotenu Shebatchu Becha Avinu Malkeinu Vatelamdem Chukei Chayim Kein Techanenu Tlamdeinu Avinu Ha'av Harachaman Amrachem Rachem Aleinu V'etem Belibeinu L'havin L'haski L'shma Lilmod U'lilamei L'shmo V'lasot U'lekayem Ekol Divrei Talmud Toratecha B'yahava V'ha'erenenu B'toratecha V'dahabek Libeinu B'mitzvotecha V'yached Levaveinu Li'ahava U'lira et Shemecha V'lo nevosh Le'olam Va'ed V'lo nevosh Le'olam Va'ed Ki v'shem Kachecha Agadol v'hadora Batachnu Nagila v'nismecha b'shuatecha V'havienu l'shalom Arba kanfot haaretz V'tolichenu komemiut le'artzeinu Yepoeh yeshut atovanu v'chata mikol ha'melashon K'eraftanu l'shimcha gadol Selah selah be'emet Lehodot lecha U'yachedcha B'yahava Baruch Adonai Abocher b'moiseh b'yahava. And we pick the talit, we take the tzitzit in our hands. It's a symbol of the acceptance of the mitzvot. And we continue page 246 with the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And together, Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levacha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha v'hayu advarim ha'ele. Asher Anochi Mitzavecha Hayom Al Levavecha V'shinamtam Levanecha V'dibarta Bam בשבתך בביתך ולך בדרך ושכבך ובקומך וקשתם מאוד על ידך ולטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך.
והויום שמוע תשמעו כל נפש
We continue to take the tzitzit in hand in the bottom third paragraph of the Shema, page 348. ויאמר אדוני משה לאמור דבר בני ישראל ונתן להם עשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם ונתנה ציצית כנפיתית לכם לציצית וראיתם אותו זכרתם מכל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם ולא תעתורו אחרי לבבכם פניכם אשר אתם זונים אחריהם למען תזכרו ועשיתם מכל מצוותי אתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם,
אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
אמת, page 350. 350, we put aside the tzitzit. We continue and calling the liberation of the children of Israel from slavery to freedom and the song of triumph at the shores of the Red Sea. Page 350 at the bottom. Tilo le'yon baruch hu mevorach Moshe uvnei Yisrael chadashim simcha rabba v'yamru chulam mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai mi kamocha nedor b'kodesh norati lo Osefele Shira Chadash Shippo Geolim L'Shimcha Asefat Hayam Shira Chadash Shippo Geolim L'Shimcha Asefat Hayam Yachad Kulam Hodu Yachad Kulam Hodu Vim Le'Yam Adonayim Le'olam Moed So Yisrael Kuma V'Yezrat Yisrael Obdechinu Mecha Yuda V'Yisrael Go Aleinu Adonai Tzivot Shemo Kadosh Yisrael Baruch Adonai Goal Yisrael. Now we rise to the meeting together, page 354. And I'll assume enough people are joining in online that we can follow with the Kedusha also. So with page 354, the opening together, and 356, and the rest silently. Adonai sifotai tiftach upi yagid tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elahei Avoteinu Elahei Avraham, Elahei Yitzchak, Elahei Yaakov Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora El Elyon Shomer Chasadim Tovim V'Konei HaKol V'Zocher Chasdei Avot V'Egel B'neihem L'man Shemo B'Yahava Melech Ozer Moshiach Baruch Adonai Magen Avraham Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Mechametim Atarav Loshia Morit Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed Mechayem Meitim Berachamim Rabim Somech Noflim Verofech Olim Umatir Asurim Omekayem Emunato Lishenei Afar Michamocha B'Geburot Umido Melech Meimit Umechayeh Umasmiach Yeshua Ne'emonat Chayot Baruch Adonai Mechayeh Hametim. 356. Nekadesh Shimcha Ba'olam Keshem Shema B'Shmei Maram Katuv Nevi'echa Karazal Zevi'omar Kadosh 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 Adonai Tzeva'ot Ma'aretz Kevodo אז בקור רעש גדול, עדי וחזק משמיעים קול, מתנסים לעומת צרפים, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו, ברוך כבוד אדוני, במקומו. וממקומך מלכנו תופיע, תמלוך עלינו כי חכים אנחנו לך, מתי תמלוך בציון, קרבנו ותשכון. תתקדש ותתקדש בתוך ירושלים עירך לדור ודור ולנצח נצחים ועינינו תראנה מלכותך כהדור בשירי עוזיך על ידי דוד משיח צדקך אלוהי ציון ודור הללויה לדור נגיד גודלך נצח נצחים קדושך נקדיש שכוחנו פנימינו ואמבוש כי אין מלך גדול דרכו תחברו גואל הקדוש ישמח מוישה ומתנס תלכו מה יודעים אנחנו לא עכשיו? השם שעולם טוב וחיים 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 בשלום. Second, bear with me 1 second. Okay. All right. We're going to do a little bit of a reprise from parts of the Amida. Let's start with page 358. Yismach Moshe. Top paragraph of 358. Yismach Moshe b'matnat elko ki ne'eman karatalo. Yismach Moshe b'matnat elko ki ne'eman karatalo. Kelil tiferet בראש נתת ביום לפניך הסיני ישמח משה במתנה חלקו כי עבד נאמן קראת לו ושני לוחות Avanim horid biyado, v'chatu bahem shemirat Shabbat, v'chatu bahem shemirat Shabbat, v'chein katu b'toratecha, v'chein katu b'toratecha. And let's continue with the Shamru. Shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם, בהני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם, בששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת וינפש. Okay, welcome. Rose has joined us online also. There's several people who've joined in on Facebook. Our Windows, in its great wisdom, did an update to all the Windows 10 systems and did not apparently coordinate it with YouTube, so YouTube's audio doesn't work, right? At least for now, till they fix it. So we're doing our entire service a cappella. Acapella. So I prefer to say Acapulco. I'd like to be in Acapulco. We'll do acapella instead. So we're going to our little bit of study. Okay. Last week, we read an interesting problem about somebody who's memorizing his Torah study, going over it, and he stops to say, what a beautiful tree this is, what a beautiful field. And we get this strange instruction that such a person is liable with his life, which sounds very bizarre. And the emphasis being, we should focus. You have to be focused. So we want to ask, well, why is this emphasis on focus? So let's look at the next one, which goes and even a word, even harsher. That's on page 624. It's verse 10 of chapter 3 of Pirkei Avot. So Rabbi Dostai bar Yanai, Mishum Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Dostai, who is actually, he says, quoting Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir, the famous partner to Rabbi Akiva, one of the key foundation pillars of the Mishnah, says, Kol ha-shochech דבר אחד ממשנתו. Anybody who forgets one thing from his studies, if you forget one thing from your studies, ma'aleva katuv kilu mitchayev benafsho, as if he was liable for his own life, right? Death penalty. Whew. Why? It says, Raki shamer lacha, be very careful, ushmor nafshecha me'od, and guard your lives very carefully. Usually that's explained as meaning the importance of taking medical care. The Jew is obligated to take medical care, by all means. But he now takes a different tack, and he says, pen tishkach, he means watch yourself carefully, lest you forget. It says, pen tishkach adadvrim asher ro'enecha, the continuation of the verse, lest you forget the things your eyes have seen. Your eyes have seen. So the actual intent of the verse is, you have seen the miracles of Egypt and the 40 years of wandering in the desert. Do not ignore them. Your life is bound up with them. Rabbis interpreted mean, take care of your life physically. Now he's taking it another sense. Do not forget what your eyes have seen. What have your eyes have seen? Your studies. Oh boy. Yeah. In other words, how many of you spent years learning something and say that you remember everything that you've learned? Huh? I've forgotten more than most people have learned, probably. Okay, so now am I liable for my life? Why would he go to this extent? Well, he says, what about, wait a minute. My memory is not what it used to be. Happens. Well, could it be that the study is getting difficult for him? Not what I used to be. Or I'm so busy, I have to survive to feed my family and myself, I can't focus. Or the material is so difficult, I really can't master it. We give you an excuse. Talmud lomar, lest you deviate from this from your heart all the days of your life. And then he explains it now. You're only liable if you really deliberately don't pay attention to your studies. Now, you know, why do you forget? Because you're not focusing. You're not focusing because you're not spending time reviewing what you've learned. Now, truth is, today, if I want to find something I forgot, if I type in the exact right phrase in Google, which is not always easy, I'll come up with multiple variations of where it is. And I go through it. You have to know what you're looking for. I find it, and there's my source. Before that, there was something called an index. You open an index at the back of the book, you find what you want. What was before an index? Okay, so there were scrolls. So you read the scroll a few times, you remembered. What was before there were scrolls? Only memory. Our rabbis did not want the Mishnah to be written in writing originally. Even when we say Rabbi Yehuda is given credit for writing the Mishnah, he's actually given credit for editing. Even in his day, which is the year 200, it is memorized. And why is the text memorized? This text is something else. In other words, if all your text is memorized and you are the teacher and you forget your line of text, your next generation is going to forget the same. They'll never have learned it. Now you've caused an error in the information to be put. It's like encoding on a computer. You leave out one line of code in a computer, and every computer after that and every writer after that's going to carry on that same error. Right? So intentionally, and somebody asked us, well, why didn't they write it down? Because they had writing. They had writing for 1,000 years before. Land of Israel, we know that of all the places, the alphabet as we have it started in the land of Israel. Canaan, Phoenicia, the Sinai. That's where the alphabet that we have for most of the Western world and the Arabic alphabet started. We had 1,000 years before. Why didn't we write down? Give me a good guess. Even the Torah as we had it, we took our time writing it down. So it's a matter of being able to perfect the text. If I have copies, and we know the copyists were very well extended. The Qumran, the whole Dead Sea Scroll, one of the biggest jobs was copying text. They had entire rooms for copying. Why don't I want to rely on the copy? That's it. And who's going to correct the mistake? So once it's in writing, the copy is out of your hand, somebody else gets it, and now you've made the mistake. Somebody's at the door. So the copy is lost. Your mistake, let's say this, it's not your copy, it's fine. Your original is lost, and you only have the mistake. And we know from what we have what is called the Masorah, which is the authoritative text of the Bible for Jews, that in the margins we have notes about this copy, this copy, this copy. We know that the copyists made mistakes. And so what the Masorah was doing was going through all the copies and saying, we're going to accept this copy instead of this copy. The Talmud is full of discussion about which copy is the right copy. Right? Rashi also, when one studies Rashi, he says, when you read this, it should be written as this. You go to the printed edition, it's already corrected because students after Rashi corrected their edition. So printing copy causes mistakes. When I have an oral copy and I'm listening as the teacher, I asked and they had people whose job was just to memorize text. I asked him, tell me what was said in such and such a date. He records, by teacher such and such. He records. This was the lesson, we recited word for word for word. He says, wait a minute. One word in there does not match. Here he says this, here he says this, now you're saying this. Either he's wrong here, he's wrong here. Let's revise what you have memorized so that the text matches what was said in earlier versions, right? So in other words, it allows me to correct the text and keep the text constantly edited and updated. Once it's in writing, it's gone. That's the whole point. So now you can understand why, if somebody is a teacher, and the whole mission is written to teachers and judges and so on, he forgets a line, he doesn't have anywhere to go to. So what you are doing constantly is you're repeating and repeating in your mind all of your study again and again and again, so that all the information is there, reinforced and reinforced. Because again, To repeat 100 times is not the same as to repeat 101 times. Today we have been taught that we don't memorize, which I think is a failure in education. Because memorization skills, as people are finding out, are very critical in developing good critical thinking skills also. So when they taught you, they made you recite by the shores of Gichigumi, down by the Shiny Right, whatever it was, Hiawatha, or to be or not to be, whatever it was. In that process, it wasn't just drudge work. It was forcing the mind to build its memorization skills, all right? Content is essential. All right, so that's the lessons from the Torah. So pay good attention, focus on what you're doing, focus on what you're thinking. Do not forget. Do not forget. Okay. We continue the Kaddish Rabbanan, page 20. Yit kadal, v'yit kadash shemei rabba, v'amad divrach kirutei, v'yamlich malchutei, chayechon v'yamechon, v'chayei b'chol beit Yisrael, v'zman kariv v'imru amen, yehi shmei rabba morach, le'olam omer mayach, yeborach v'yishtabach, v'yipoar, v'yitamam v'yitnaseh, yithadav, yitaleh v'yithalal, shemei dikudshah berichu, le'elam minkom bir chata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechemata, da'amiram v'amah v'imru amen, Al Yisrael, Al Rabbanon, Al Tamidehon, Al Kol Tamidei Tamidehon, Command Skin Baraita Di Vatra Hadein Bedi B'chol Atar V'atar Elhon Elchon Shlomo Rabba China V'chisarachin Hain Arichin Uzani Viche V'kolim Mikolim V'in Di V'shmaya V'imru Amen Yei Shlomo Rabba Min Shemaya V'chayim Aleinu V'akoyse V'imru Ose Shalom B'imramav Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'akoyse V'imru Amen. Now we're going to the service for the reading of the Torah.
Ein kamocha.
Yeah. Okay, so they're having a problem, something in that update. YouTube itself, ooh, they didn't pay their bills to the Russians. That's it. Or the Chinese or the Iranians, one of them. Yeah, the hackers are not expensive. They're 5 million, 10 million, not expensive. So, all right, now we know. Page. Luckily, paper doesn't go down as easily. All right. 394. We joined in on the service. Oh, and I thought I would play it on my cell phone instead. I guess that's down also. I'll try it. I'll try to see if that'll work. We'll find out. Page 394. So not help. Ein kamocha Elohim Adonai ve'ein kemasecha malchut malchut kol olamim umemshaltecha b'chol dor v'dor Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai yimlach Adonai oz lamo yitein Adonai yivarech et amo b'shalom Rachamim v'tiva v'tzoncha Zion Tivnei chamot Yerushalayim Tivnei chamot Yerushalayim Ki b'cha leva batachnu melech eram v'nisa Adon olamim. Okay, Marcel is opening the ark. Thank you. Vayhi ben Saharon, vayom Moshe, Uma Adonai, veyafotu oivecha, veyanusu mipanecha, ki mitzion tetzei Torah, ki mitzion tetzei Torah, u'devar Adonai mi Yerushalayim, Baruch shenatan Torah, Baruch shenatan Torah, le'amo Yisrael, v'kedushato. Page 398, the prayer in front of the ark. Be'ana, in the middle of
Well,
towards the end of the top paragraph.
Bei
Be'ana rachet,
Rachet,
Velishme
Velishmei
Kadisha,
Kadisha,
Kadisha
Kadisha
Yakira,
Yakira,
Ana
Ana
Amatush
Atush
Bechan,
Becham,
Be'ana rachet,
Be'arachet,
Be'ana rachet,
Be'arachet,
Velishme
Velishmei
Kadisha,
Kadisha,
Kadisha
Kadisha
Yakira,
Yakira,
Ana
Ana
Amatush
Matush
Bechan,
Becham,
Yeheiraba
Yeheirabra
Kadamach,
Aduma,
V'tiftach
V'tiftach
libi
libi
be'oraita,
be'oraita,
v'tashlim mishalin delibi,
Delibi,
v'liba
deliba,
decholamach
b'chalamach
Yisrael, v'tavu
Yisrael.
chayin v'lishlaham.
Amen.
Amen. Okay, repeat after me, page 398. Shema Yisrael
Yisrael,
Adonai
Adonai,
Eloheinu
Eloheinu.
Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai, Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu
Echad
Gadol Adonenu
Eloheinu,
Kadosh Shemo.
Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
Gadelul
Lu
Adonai
Adonai Te,
Shemo
Shelo
Yachdav
Lachdav,
Lecha Adonai
Hashamu,
Hagedol
Ula Ve'agivu,
Ve'hagevora Ve'hatiferet
Ve'atiferet,
Ve'hanetzach Ve'hahod Ki chov
Yichal
hashamayim
Bashamayim
uva'aretz Ki
V'haaretz,
chov hashamayim uva'aretz Lecha Adonai Hamamlacha v'mitnaseh l'chol l'rosh romemu, romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu, ve'ishtachavu L'Adam raglav kadoshu romemu, romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu, ve'ishtachavu le'akadsho. Ki
Ki
kadosh
kadosh
Adonai
Adonai Eloheinu.
Eloheinu. And we continue. It's already, please be seated. I have some newcomers here. So introduce yourself, please. Your name? Farida. Farida. Welcome. Shabbat Shalom. And your name? Gary. Zhao. Welcome. Welcome. Shabbat Shalom. Good to have you. And to all of you who have been here before, Shabbat Shalom also, and online as well. And those who are following us on Facebook and YouTube, Shabbat Shalom to all of you. Huh? Oh, so you're not following us on YouTube. I hope you're getting us, but I think you're getting us on Facebook. It's coming through. All right. Okay, so I apologize that I can't play the nice music selection. I had something it was so lovely to offer for the opening of my talk. I'll play it next time. I'll hum a few lines for you this week, but that'll kill it. Okay, page 4, our Torah reading. Sorry, hold on one second. I'm going to pull this off of my...
What?
Okay, let's make sure this is... Yeah, we're on page 641 in the Chumash, 641.
41, what? Page 20, verse 20.
So this is the famous account of Korach and his gang who rebel against the leadership of Moses. And you all know the story of the earth opening up and swallowing up and the whole gang fall down into the earth. And there's a claim somewhere in ancient times that someone knew where Korach was buried and that he had listened to the hole in the ground, and the voice comes out of the hole in the ground saying, Moses is right. Moses is right. Which leads us to a question about some of the miracles in the Bible. How could it happen? So there are two things in the news just this week that I thought was sort of appropriate. See, here, the earth opens up and Moses says, you guys, if I'm right, something's going to happen to you that has never happened before in existence. earth opens its mouth, swallows them up. Just this week at a big hospital in Jerusalem, Shaare Tzedek Hospital in Jerusalem, the ground opened up in the parking lot. Bunch of cars, nobody, luckily nobody was injured. And I realized that, I think, wait a minute, the ground opens up a lot. Florida, it's constantly opening up. There was a whole museum in Florida once that was swallowed, right? And in the desert also, you got sinkholes. Why? Because during the winter, you have heavy rains. The rains are digging under the ground. You have a ground that is soft. You get Korach and all his company standing in one place, boom. Yeah. How about Fairfax also caved in? Actually, Fairfax caved in. There was a break in the sewer. Lower Canyon, the hill fell down completely. Also, road opened up. Okay, so that's one. Okay, now besides California, we have earthquakes. That also happens. Then the other thing happened this week, right? The story of Jonah. We're always apologizing. Says, we have the image, a whale swallowed Jonah. We say, but the Hebrew doesn't say a whale, it says a big fish. I read the news this week. A guy was swallowed by a whale and whale spit him out. Did you hear this?
Yeah.
Guy was diving.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And all of a sudden, he felt himself being engulfed by something big, and he thought it was maybe a great shark, a great white, and just swallowed him. And they said there were no teeth, and he realized it was a whale. And within not a long time, luckily for him, the whale shot him out of its mouth.
Yeah.
And he got away. Because I'm sure the whale understands this. Their baleen whales means they only eat these tiny floating crustaceans. They can't swallow big things like a person. So they spit it. So the whale spits out. So, okay, now I know the story of Jonah. He was deep sea diving, right? Thrown in the water. Whale came up, took a bite, swallowed, said, oh, threw him out. These kinds of things probably have happened in antiquity and became the basis for Jonah's account, right? Where someone felt, right, some big fish. There was a humpback whale there. I don't know the Mediterranean whales, which kinds they have there. But you can see how nature plays its part. So it's a matter of the time, right? Korah happened to be standing at a point where the earth was going to open up. Moses knew it, maybe. God made him say, stand there, you stand there. But that's not the real point. What's the real point of the story of Korah? We have two stories woven into Korah. And we're going to be reading the middle, which is where the ground opens up. And also the rebels among the other leaders also get burnt. And Aaron's rod flowers is an indication that Aaron is the authoritative priesthood. So Korah is rebelling against the authority of Aaron, to some extent also Moses, because after all, they have the same grandfather. So how come he's elevated and I'm not? It's the grandfather, great-grandfather. Yeah, grandfather and great-grandfather. How come he gets first dibs and I'm left carrying the bags for him, the other Levites? Yeah.
Is it possible that the Levites got to be connected with the Mishkan and the sacred things because actually they were kind of violent? These people kind of impose themselves on the rest of the tribe by force, trying to get the power to be doing the...
Yeah, but now they have the power. All right, so here's the good question. Okay, so yeah, so here it is. It's coming from the biblical accounts, and we have a weaving of, as I say, multiple stories. So it was at one time was the eldest of each clan or family was responsible for doing the offerings, and then it was transferred. And the Bible talks about transferring, replacing the firstborn with the Levites, the tribe of Levites. But now there's a who does what job, and not everybody can be number one. You got to figure out there's only one number one at a time. So number one is going to come out of one particular family. And what's interesting is DNA studies seem to support the idea that even those people who are Kohanim today tend to have not 100% but a large number similar DNA pattern straight across the board, whether Sephardic or Ashkenazic and so on. So the Levites have a different DNA pattern, also similar, tends to be, again, not 100%, but a large amount. So That's rebellion number one. Rebellion against it. The second one is, though, Korach is not alone. Datan v'Aviram of the tribe of Reuben, because now, wait a minute, who's in charge? The Levites are in charge. You, Moses and Aaron, you guys, who put you in charge? We're all equal, right? The famous animal farm, all animals are equal, except some are more equal than others. I don't buy into it. How come you're more equal than me? They lead the political rebellion. So we have a religious rebellion, we have a political rebellion in hand, right? Two different rebellions taking place. Very interesting commentary. Yeah.
What is not really clear is from the Reuben tribe, what was the objective of the rebellion? It was clear from Korah, but from
Reuben.
I know that there was, since they were in the same area, both are connected.
Yes, the ideas, so the influence. Reuben is the firstborn of the tribes. And yet he's demoted. So Reuben is also the first tribe that is eventually exiled and eliminated of the 12 tribes. And this would indicate that they sense they're being pushed aside. The 12 tribes in just the previous chapter, 12 spies are brought in. Who are the heroes? Joshua, who's Ephraim, and Caleb ben Yefuneh, who is Judah. These are the preferred tribes, one for the north, one for the south. Whereas Reuben, firstborn. So there is this problem that comes up. There are two commentaries, and then we'll go into the reading, which indicate how we are dealing with political machination. When Datan and Abiram are complaining, there's a third fellow, On ben Pelet. But later on in the story, he doesn't appear again. So the rabbis take this as an opportunity to say, and here's the flaw in many revolutions. Revolutions are always being led by the second tier elite against the first tier elite, pulling the bottom tier. You go to the history of all revolutions, the second child or the second level of aristocracy or capitalist society, the oligarchs, whatever you want to have it, pushing against the first tier. So On ben Pelet is ready to join the revolution. And his wife stops him and says, you're not going there. He says, why? He says, look, there's Korach, Datan, and Abiram, and you're at the end of the line. Moses ahead of you. Okay, they get rid of Moses, Korach, and Datan, and Abiram, and you're still at the end of the line. All right, so don't rush to join the revolution, because very often the revolution is not for justice, it's somebody jockeying for number one position instead of number two position. That's number one. That's the experience already back then. The other one, Korach, the example of the demagogue. They give this example. Korach uses, he comes in with all dressed in blue. And Moses says, how come you're all dressed in blue? Well, you're telling us that we should have one fringe of blue on our garments. Let's do the whole thing blue. We're better than you, right? That kind of play, right? One-upmanship. The other is the story of a fictional woman, a fictional widow. In fact, the story is in here. I think he has it in here. Yeah, the story of the widow. Yeah, this is worth reading. It's on page 638. And again, how politicians demagogue an issue, right? So there's a poor widow with a field, right? It would create a straw man situation. She comes to plow it. Moses forbade her to plow it with an ox and ass together. Then she began to sow it, and Moses forbade her to mix seeds, different kinds of seeds, right? All these laws of Moses, right? They're knocking them down. And then during the harvest, he says, leave the corners for the poor. And then he says, take the first offerings for the Levites. So she can't plow what she wants to plow. She can't plant what she wants to plant. The poor are going to take the corners of her field. She is really upset. Then he says, then you're going to give certain percentage to the Levites. Hey, what's left of it? She's just a poor widow. So she's tired, she's fed up, she sells the field. And she buys some sheep, hoping that way she'll live off the sheep. But then the firstling was born. Aaron said, wait a minute, the firstborn comes to the temple. Wait a minute. Well, then when they shear the sheep the first time, Aaron comes and says, well, the first offering of the fleece comes to me. By then, she's really fed up, and she slaughters the sheep in her anger. And then Aaron says, okay, now that sheep actually belongs to me, so I take the sheep and eat it in the temple. You got left with nothing. All right, so again, it is how, again, we hear this politicians, you reinterpret what the other guy is saying to make your case look good or bad, depending on how you want to do it. All right, so Korach is the epitome of the demagogue. That is the way the rabbis interpret it. So let's go ahead then. Yeah.
There is also a second part, which is toward the end, the imposition of the taxes. 20% has to be
Taxes. Nobody wants taxes.
Yeah.
What's new? What's it's tax. It's all tax. That's tax.
We have where, just to go back to where the second more, it refers throughout. Going back to
Oh, in terms of position, rank position, except here it's going back to the number one is rank position one, right? Except the advice. You know, so always have this. That's not a tax issue. That's a primogenitor. Reverse, except primogenitor works everywhere else in the Bible, except where it's a position of authority, and then it's somebody else. Like David is number 7.
This was a tax to support the temple, yes.
Yeah, it's all tax. Then the king had his own tax on top of that. Remember that? Yeah. By the way, just so you know, for tzedakah, if you've got children, they're considered tzedakah. So if you're still feeding your kid when they're grown up, they have to live in with you in the house. That's also considered tzedakah. Yeah.
The interesting thing of all the story is that Moses somehow is about the politics in the Bible somehow.
He lets God. Well, God says you don't get in the fight. I'll show you. Right. So it's because, and there's a good point, because he is, what's the word? He has to recuse himself. It's his brother, right? This is his cousin. This is his brother. So he has to recuse himself. In all of these cases, you'll notice that Moses, God says, you step aside, I have to do it, because then your authority would be impugned. You have a benefit. So it's not Moses opening the ground, it's, God, right? Had Moses been the one to say, strike them down, he would have been impugned. Right, he's defending his position. Okay, so let's go ahead then. I see Judy has joined us, Doug has joined us. I've got a Torah portion up here, ready, page. I'm going to be using this to find my pages. Everything is up quick today. Page 641, verses 20 through 27. 641, verses 20 through 27.
20, verse 20.
Okay. Page 641.
וידבר ברוך הוא וידבר אדוני משה אל אהרון וידבר אדוני משה אל אהרון לאמור
Verses 20 through 27. Ya'amod Moshe ben Yitzchak HaKohen.
ברוך ה' ברך לעולם ועד. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Number 2, Joe. Joe.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Yamod, Yeronach Medabit Shaga, Levi, verses
Baruch
48 to
Hu es
60,
Adonai
45 and
HaMavorach.
642. Go ahead. Go, Joe.
Baruch Hu es Adonai
Joe, I
HaMavorach.
don't hear you. Is your mic
Baruch
on?
Adonai Melech Haolam. Asher b'chabonu mikol u'amim. V'natan lanu es Torusoi. Baruch Atu Adonai Noten
I don't hear
HaTorah.
you. No, he's not. Both of the, he's got the phone also. Aye. On his, yeah. Did you do the blessings?
Yes, I
Joe,
did.
just signal yes with your hand and give me a thumbs up if you did the blessing.
Yes.
Huh?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Amen.
Vayomer Moshe. Baruch Adonai Melech Haolam.
Final
Asher
blessing and then
natan
wave
lanu
when you're
Torah
finished.
Shemer. Chayom nata basochenu. Baruch Atu Adonai Noten HaTorah.
And okay. Amen. All right.
Could you?
Okay. And Shlishi, the third aliyah.
Amen.
Third aliyah, verses 1 through 5. 17, 642 or 643, 1 through 5. Go ahead. Ta'amo, Oindi, Brocha,
Kama Barbu.
Brocha bat
Hava.
Menuch.
Hava ben Menucha.
Behind. Okay. Go ahead.
Baruch Hanam Borach L'Olam Boel.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. וידבר אדוני משה לאמור.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen.
That was my favorite.
Okay, so now we're continuing verses 6
Oh,
to
Thomas.
6.
ואילונו ויבוא משה על את מועד.
Amen. Verses 9 through 15. Page 643, verses 9 through 15.
ברכו. ברוך אמן. אמן.
Okay, continue number page 644. 644, verses 16 through 20. 16 through 20. Yeah. Okay.
וידבר משה לאמור דבר.
We're number 6. No, we're number 5. Wait, what number are we on now? 1, 2, 3, 6.
16.
There we go. Yeah, got it. 16. Number 6. Go ahead.
ויברך להם בועד. תורתו. אמן. אמן. Amen.
Number 7, verses 21 through 24.
I'll tell you who.
Amen. The Hatzi Kaddish, and then the prayer for those who are ill first. Okay, Mishaberach Havotenu, Abraham Yitzchak V'Yaakov Sharif Karachev Leah, who Yivrech V'Rapeh Et HaCholim, may the one who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless and heal those who are ill. Pechsber Tiskovsky, Miriam Leodorf, Moisey Kelchik, Ronnie Duran, Harriet Levins, Moisey Ben Manya, Barbara Mormon, Joe Alexander, Robert Drato, Roger Rosen, Rachel Aflalo, Susan Tuchman, Shirley Marco, Julie Alkali, and Richard Zeller, and Levin Masha Ben Sarah, Louis Jason, Gary Maureen Tucker, Erna Nissan, and Liva Batsara, Chana Batsara, Eliyahu Ben Chana, Herb Mormon, Irina Sepian, Shoshana Batsara, Chana Sarah, Leah Bat Rachel, Chana Sarah Bat Kayla Alta, Alan Whalen, Haya Nesti, Sophie, friend of Judy Alkali, Jennifer Fraser, and all those afflicted by the COVID-19 virus. Let me ask all of you, please, go ahead, Marcelo. Ron Rothman, Tito Ben Gary Gordichov, Rachabat Ventura, Wendy Keller. Joe, I know you've got some names.
Yeah. Sima Harlev.
Okay, try. We're not hearing them.
You can't hear me?
Okay.
Yeah. Sima Harlev, Ronan Ter Harlev, Susan Feinberg, Sharon Lipman, Esther Rachel Batsiva,
Okay.
Laban Moshe Ben Sarah, and Shlomo Ben Lazar, and Carl Flex.
Okay. So all of those that you have in your mind, in your heart, Joe, may they get a speedy and quick recovery. And Barbara and Judy, if you have anybody to add, or Rosa, let us know. We continue. HaKadosh Baruch Hu yishlach lehem refuah shlema, refuat nefesh, refuat haguf. May the Holy One send healing both in body and in mind to them, to all those whose names you have mentioned today, and to all who are ill of the house of Israel and of all people. And let us all say, Amen.
Amen.
And we have the Mishaberach. Do you have the sheets with you with the Mishaberach prayer? We're going to sing that along also.
By the way, I could hear Joe loud and clear.
Together.
Oh, now I can hear you loud and clear too.
Avotenu, Mekoha Bracha Limotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing. And let us say, Amen. Mishaberach Imotenu, Mekoha Bracha Lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, renewal of body, renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Amen.
And now come to the Haftarah. Haftarah.
Yeah.
The Makta reading first.
After page
644 verses 21
448.
through 24. I'll pull myself up. Rabbi Weinberg. Not today. Continuing. It won't get displaced. There we go. Well, let me leave it. We'll just, yeah, okay. Here we go. Here we go. All right.
Oh, much better.
No, we hear each other fine. They can't hear us. Hi, Rabbi, you can't hear us, can you?
Yeah.
You can't hear.
Oh, yeah.
Baruch Hu Adonai Baruch.
Baruch Hanam Barach Lalam
Baruch Baruch Hatan Mecholam Asher B'Chaban Mikol Amim V'Natan Lanu Et Torto Baruch Hatan Notein HaTorah.
Amen.
והיה האיש אשר אבחר בו מטה יפרח וחסכתי מעלי את התלונות בני ישראל אשר הם מלינים עליכם וידבר משה בני ישראל ויתנו אליו כל נשיאיהם מטה לנשיאיהם מטה נשיא אחד מטה לנשיא אחד לבית אבותם 12 מטות ומטה אהרון בתוך מטותם ויונח משה את המטות לפני אדוני ואל מועד ואל העדות, ויהי ממחרת ויבוא משה אל העדות, והנה פרח מטה אהרון לבית לוי, ויצא פרח ויצא ציץ, ויגמל שקדים, ויצא משה אל כל המטות מלפני אדוני אל כל בני ישראל, וישראל יראו ויקחו איש מטהו. ברוך אתה מכל אשר נתן, וחרבנו מכל אשר נתן לנו את תורתו, ברוך אתה נותן התורה.
Amen.
Hag Ben Galila, please raise the Torah and take it from,
Zos HaTorah.
Let's take it from here. Yeah, save it. Yeah, that's it from here. Please write. Bezot
Torah.
HaTorah, Asher Moshe.
V'nei b'nei Yisrael, Yadonai, Yad Moshe. Eit Chaim hi l'machazikim ba, Tom Chaim me'ushar.
Eit Chaim hi l'machazikim ba, Tom Chaim me'ushar.
V'rachenu,
Dachenu am,
v'cholchenu,
v'chol netivotei
v'chol
shalom.
shalom.
Dachenu am, v'chol netivotei shalom.
After Vayomer Shemuel El Ha'am Lecha.
Okay. The Haftarah is found page 649, 649. And it is taken from the book of Samuel. And it's very parallel to Moses, because just as Moses is being criticized and he steps back and says, well, who did I take anything from? Samuel echoes the same refrain when the children of Israel want to pick a king. They are in existential trouble. They know the Philistines on one side, on the other side, the Ammonites are attacking on the other side. We need someone capable of leading us. And he looks at Saul, gives him Saul, but he's very much afraid. He says, first of all, did I ever take a thread from you? Right? It means Ashakti, who did I oppress? Whose donkey did I take? Let them answer me, right? And then he goes again, and we can sense what is his real concern, that whoever you pick as king, his real concern is, shall not be someone who will override the royal authority. The Samuel echoes this. Obviously, we're leading to David, and David becomes very powerful, unifies the kingdom. Son Solomon becomes even more powerful, unifies the kingdom, builds it, expands it. But there is in the Bible an underlying sense that we are afraid of too much aggrandizement into one man of authority. Even Moses, you can see, has to delegate authority to the 70 elders. All right, so religious authority, one thing, but the political authority needs to be devolved, spread. And that is what Samuel is afraid of in the sense of a king. And so we find in the Bible a lot of restrictions on the power, the central power of a government. It's more, the authority is vested in the judges and case law rather than one person, one capricious authority. And of course, that later on in history leads to, in Europe, as the Bible is translated into the local language, as the local people begin to read the stories of Samuel saying, watch who you pick for a king, or the authority, limit on the authority of the king in Deuteronomy, they begin to question their own kings and princes. And hence we have all the waves of revolutions from the beginning of the Protestant Reformation down to our time. It's from this, yeah.
How was Saul prepared to fight to become king? Saul,
Oh, okay. So Samuel is the one who appoints Saul. He looks for somebody who has a perfect personality. And Saul, so Saul was from the weakest of the tribes, Benjamin. The tribe had almost disappeared. Saul himself was a tall, powerful figure, but from the weakest of the tribes. So presumably he would not be able to take authority, overextend his authority and power. But then, of course, there's a falling out. Saul does not listen to Samuel. There's two specific incidences, and he realizes that Saul is not the right person. And then later on, we see as David is the one who's going to be picked. Well, David is, yes, from the youngest of 7 sons, but of the most powerful tribe of the south, Judah. And this time he takes the opposite tack. Instead of going to the weakest tribe, he's going to go to the strongest tribe. This is the strongest tribe of the south, and put the eggs in that basket, right? So, but then after Samuel dies, we see from Saul's behavior that Samuel was right, because the power of kingship has so overwhelmed Saul that he goes mad, thinking that there's someone other than him would be king. All right, so and he goes insane.
in some sense, the first authority over all the tribes and power was the Kohen. But
Yeah.
now you have a political figure who has much.
Yeah. The Kohen has Kohen has no political power. See, no political power. Only in the time of the Maccabees did the Kohen take the political realm. Only at that time. Up till that time, there's the local tribal leaders and the judges appointed. The Kohen comes in sometimes to adjudicate a case, but no political power is given to the Kohen. That's very important.
All the tribes were separated, and the only thing that united all
Yeah, it was the sanctuary. Right, but he had no authority over them. Yeah. Right, and that's why they united. That's why they needed a king, because the Kohen could not do that. It was not his realm. He would be overstepping his realm. So we have no cases of the Kohen stepping into the realm. Samuel is sort of a crossover because he has some of the authority of the Kohen, but he's not appointed as a Kohen. He's there as a shofet, as one of the judges. All right, so that's very important. Let's see what somebody has done here. Anybody? Okay. Oh, good. So Zoom is working. That's good. So somehow they could hear Joe, but somehow they couldn't hear here.
You can't hear me either. Can you?
Maybe it's individual. Okay. Well, we'll find out what's happening. Let's go ahead. We got more. Okay, good. We got more on Zoom with us here today. It's good all together. We're going to go ahead with the Haftarah then. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratzav v'divreihem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'torah u'b'Moshe abdo ישראל עמו והאמת והצדק. ויאמר
אמן.
שמואל אל העם לכו ונלכה הגלגל נחדש שם המלוכה וילכו כל העם הגלגל וימליכו שם את שאול לפני רב בגלגל יזבחו שם זבחים שלמים לפני רב וישמח שם שאול כל אנשי ישראל עד מאוד. אומר שמואל אל כל ישראל הנה שמעתי בקולכם לכל אשר אמרתם לי ואמליך עליכם מלך ועתה הנה המלך מתהלך לפניכם ואני זקנתי ושבתי ובניי הנם איתכם ואני התהלכתי לפניכם מנוריי עד היום הזה. הנני אנובי נגד ארוני ונגד משיחו את שור מי לקחתי וחמור מי לקחתי ואת מי עשקתי ואת מי רצותי מיד מי לקחתי כופר ועלימני פה ושיב לכם ויאמרו לא עשקתנו ולא רצותנו ולא לקחת מיד איש מאומה. ויאמר עליהם עד אדוני בכם ועד משיחו היום הזה כי לא מצאתם בידי מאומה ויאמר עד. And just the last line, his warnings, ויאמר שמואל העם אל תיראו אתם עשיתם את כל הרעה הזאת אך אל תסורו מאחורי אדוני ועבדתם את אדוני בכל לבבכם לא תסורו כי אחרי התוהו אשר לא יעילו ולא יצילו כי תוהו המה כי לא יטוש אדוני את עמו בעבור שמו הגדול כי הואיל אדוני לעשות אתכם לעולם. ברוך אתם בחולם אשר צור כל עמים צדיק בכל דורות נאמן האומר ויעשה המדבר מקיים שכל דבריו אמת וצדק נאמן אדוננו ונאמנים דבריך ודבר אחד מדבריך כל לא ישוב ריקם כי המלך נאמן ורחמן אתה ברוך אתה אדוני אל נאמן בכל דבריו.
אמן.
על ציון כי בית חיינו ולעבור את נפש תושייה במהרה בימינו ברוך אתה נאמן שמח ציון בבוניה שמחנו נהנו ביד רבי עבדך מלכות בית דוד משך במהרה ויגד כזה יושם קדשך נשבעת לו שלא יכבן נראה לי ברוך אתה אדוני מגן דוד התורה והעבודה והנביאים והיום השבת הזה שנתת לנו את נעילנו לקדושה ולמנוחה לכבוד ולתפארת הכל אנחנו מודים לך ברוכים אותך יברך שמך בפיקי תמיד לעמד ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת.
Amen.
Now again because YouTube is down I don't have any beautiful music for prayer for the country or for Israel but we'll recite together prayer for our country page 415 in the prayer books. Our God and God of our ancestors, we ask your blessings for our country, for its government, for its leaders and advisors, and for all who exercise just and rightful authority. Teach them insights of your Torah that they may administer all affairs of state fairly, that peace and security, happiness and prosperity, justice and freedom may forever abide in our midst. Creator of all flesh, bless all the inhabitants of our country with your spirit. May all citizens of all races and creeds forge a common bond in true harmony to banish all hatred and bigotry, and to safeguard the ideals and free institutions which are the pride and glory of our country. May this land under your providence be an influence for good throughout the world, uniting all people in peace and freedom and helping them to fulfill the visions of your prophet. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they experience war anymore. And let us say, Amen.
Amen.
And we pray for the state of Israel. Page 416. Avinu Sheba Shamayim So Yisrael Begalo Borech et Medinat Yisrael Reshit Smicha Gulatenu Hagen Aleha Bevrat Chasdecha Ufros Aleha Sukat Shalomecha Shlach Amitcha Noshas Arav Yateha Taknim Beitzah Tova Milfanecha strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land. Avinu Sheba Shamayim deliver them and crown their efforts with triumph. Avinu Sheba Shamayim So Yisrael Begalo bless our land with peace, O God, inhabitants with lasting joy, and let us say Amen. Avinu Sheba Shamayim So Yisrael Begalo Barech et Medinat Yisrael Eshit Smicha Gulatenu Hagen Aleha Bevrat Chasdecha Ufros Aleha Sukat Shalomecha V'nomar Amen. And we return the Torah to the Ark, page 422. Let's pick it up.
Yeah, hallelujah. Yeah, hallelujah. Shame of the Lord.
Yeah, which side is up and down? Please rise. Yalelu Hashem Adonai, Kiniskav Shema Levado, Hoda Leretz V'Shamayim, Vayarem Kerem Le'amot, Tehila Lecho Chatzihida, Livnei Yisrael, Am Kerovo, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Mizmor David. Havul Adonai b'nei Elim, Havul Adonai kavavos, Havul Adonai kavod shemo, Ishtach Havul Adonai b'hadrat kodesh, Kol mayim akvod irim, Adonai mayim rabim, Kol Adonai ba'koach, Kol Adonai b'hada, Kol Adonai shomer arzim, Vayshaber Adonai et azeh havanon, Yekenim k'megavon v'silyon k'mo ben reimim, Kol Adonai chotzev lavotesh, Kol Adonai yachem midbar, Yachil Adonai mibakadesh, Kol Adonai yachol elayalot, Echsof yorechol kolo omer kavod, Adonai lamabul yasha, Vayeshev Adonai melech leolam, Adonai oz le'amo yitein, Adonai yivarech et amo, Vashalom. Nechoyamav, page 426. Chayim hi lamachazikim ba, Betom ha'meosha, Deracheha dacheina, V'chon netivoteha shalom, Ashiveinu Adonai, Elecha benashava, Chadesh, Chadesh yameinu, Chadesh yameinu kekedem. You may be seated for 1 second. We're not doing the full Musaf, but the idea of the Musaf is to add an additional entity of prayer. As reminded this on Shabbat, there was a second sacrifice offered. So from the Musaf, page 434, Yismechu, on the bottom paragraph, and let's all join in Yismechu as our Musaf offering, our additional offering for the Shabbat. Yismechu b'malechutecha, Shomrei Shabbat v'karei oneg Shabbat. Yismechu b'malechutecha, Shomrei Shabbat v'karei oneg Shabbat. Mekadeshei Shvi Shabbat, Kulam Yisbu V'Tangu Mituvecha Shabbat, Yismechu B'malechutecha, Shomrei Shabbat V'karei oneg Shabbat, Yismechu B'malechutecha, Shomrei Shabbat V'karei oneg Shabbat. Uvashvi ratzita bo v'kidashto Shabbat Hemdat Yamim Oto Korata Shabbat Yismechu B'malechutecha, Shomrei Shabbat V'karei oneg Shabbat. Zecher L'maseh Bereshit Shabbat. Zecher L'maseh Bereshit Shabbat. Yismechu B'malechutecha, Shomrei Shabbat V'karei oneg Shabbat. And we continue. Enkelo Heinu, page 508. Enkelo Heinu, Ein Adonenu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kamosheinu, Eloheinu, Adoneinu, Makeinu, Moshienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adoneinu, Nodel Makeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adoneinu, Baruch Makeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adoneinu, Atahu Makeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Shektiru, Avoteinu, Lefanecha Eketoret Asamihim. Now we continue the Aleinu. Please rise, page 510. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'tekiru le'otzeya b'reishit, shelo senekei haratzot, v'lo samanu mishpachot adama, shelo samchakenu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu shenotei shamayim v'yosed haaretz masher v'kara b'shamayim imal Osheinatu zo, v'gavei meromim, u'Eloheinu einod, ememakeinu efezulato, kakatu b'torato, yadata yom v'ashivata elevavecha, ki Adonai u'Elohim, b'shamayim imal, v'al haaretz mitachateinod.
Nehema.
V'nehemar v'haya Adonai lemelech hakol haaretz Bayomahu yeh Adonai echad U'shemo echad. Please be seated. This Shabbat, we recall those who passed away this year: Elaine Goldsmith, Irma Smith, Margaret Zadok, Devorah Levy, Chaim Levy, Ilanit Bat Yitzhak, Harry Kyle, Ann Davis Wenker, Jack Petsko, Hayan Nesti, and also the
Martin Cohn
this week.
Martin
Menya
Cohen.
Kligerman, and I see Joe. I see Adele. Joe, that's your wife, your dear wife.
Coming
Adele,
up.
When we recite the Kaddish, so recite it along. We'll try. It picks it up. It picks you up. But we'll recite it with her in our hearts and minds. Page 512. The one is Kaddish. Yitkadal, Yitkadash, Shemerabah. Bialma, Divrachirute, Biamlich Malchute, Bechayechon, Uvyamechon, Vchaye Dechol Beit Yisrael, Bagalav Bizman Karib Imro Amen, Eish Meir Rabon Vorach Leolam Omer Maya, Yiborach, Vishtabach, Vipoah, Vitamam Yitnaseh, Yithada, Vitale, Vithalal, Shemei Dekudsha Berichu, Le'ela, Mikol Birchata V'shirata, Tush Bechata V'nechamata, Damrion Biomah V'imro Amen, Eish Lama Rabbo Min Shemaya B'chayim Aleinu V'Kosev V'Amen, Ose Shalom B'Imrama, Uyase Shalom Aleinu, Amen. We're going to wrap up with Adon Olam and then go into my discussion. I said I had a musical piece. I'm going to see if I can get, maybe YouTube is working on my phone because it's an Android and not a Windows platform. We'll see if that makes any difference. We'll try. If not, I'm going to hum along and you'll try to figure out what I'm humming. Page 514, Adon Olam, the regular old-fashioned way. Adon Olam, Hashem Olach, B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra, V'nasa B'chefzo Kol Azai Melech, Shemo Nikra V'Yacharei Kichlot HaKol, Levado yimloch nora, Vehu haya, Vehu hove, Vehu yeh, betifara, Vehu echad, Ve'en sheni. Lehamshil lo, Lahachbira, Beli reishi, Beli tachlit, Velo ha'oz, Ve'hamisra, Vehu eli, Ve'chai goali, Ve'tzor hevli, Be'etzara, Vehu nisi, Umanosli, Menat kosi, Beyom ekra, Biyado, Afkiduchi. Mieti shai v'ya'ira, Imruchi geviati, Adonai li, v'lo ira. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat
Okay,
shalom.
I'm going to see. We had trouble, those of you following along online. Windows did an update and it made YouTube incompatible for some reason, but I'm going to try to pull this up on my Android. Maybe they didn't mess that program up.
Mhm.
And see if you can recognize this. Is it coming through the speakers?
Yeah, it's gone.
There's my speaker. There we go.
Yeah, now it's coming through very good.
I don't think it's yours. I'm gonna just turn the volume.
Mhm.
Okay, what was it that I played?
A tikva.
No, that was
Music,
George
is
Bizet.
anybody
That
with
was
music in the background?
Lalaisienne.
What did it sound like?
George Bizet. Lalaisienne.
Well, it sounds like Hatikva, didn't it? 'Cause
No.
you're singing,
Yes.
but it's
No.
not coming.
Rosa knows the answer.
No.
What
Lalaisienne.
composition is it?
George Bizet, Lalaisienne.
Smetana the Moldau. It's a Czech
No, you.
music composition. Moldau. Okay, so the question is now listen to this one. Okay, and now tell me what this is now.
No. Oh,
This guy
lo
shifts.
ada tikvateinu Yasuva HaMashiach Miyom Lecha Shem Etzenu Eretz Tzidon Yerushalayim Miyom Lecha
And there we go.
Shem
Right, that
Etzenu.
sounds so close, aren't they? So
Yeah.
all along, I was always told, and a lot of people said, well, it's when it came to the hymn melody to go along with the beautiful poem by Naftali Hertz Imber, that we had this beautiful Czech folk melody that Smetana adapted to the Moldau, which is the main river, or Vltava. But really, I said, wait a minute, is that the story or not? Let's find out what's the real story behind it. I said, I have to find out the truth. So let's find out the truth. Because I looked it up. I said, you know, I'm starting to talk about Herzl, and what could be more appropriate for Herzl than to throw in a little bit about, you know, how we borrowed from the Czechs for a melody. Well, it turns out, let me get it to open, yeah. So I'm putting this up. Give me 1 second. There we go. And this is an article by Shlomo Meital, and he goes into the history of the Tikva. So
The word
the hope, right. So the poet is a poet, Naftali Hertz Imber, and his poem was originally called Tikvatenu, and then it becomes Hatikva, from Galicia, when he was born in 1856, and when he was 25, that's the first wave of Aliyah, more or less, he decided to take a little notebook and he wrote his poems and became a poet, pretty popular poet in those days. Unfortunately, he was also an alcoholic. He had a drinking problem. And in 1887, he was broke. He went back to New York, married a non-Jewish woman. He divorced her, died penniless from his alcoholism. This was his problem. Okay. But his poem caught on. Later on, it was Hatikva Hanoshana, our old hope. And it was readopted in 1895 to fit this new Zionism, and they added the words, right? The Hatikva as we know it today, by David Yellen, founded the Hebrew school, the Jewish teachers school in Yerushalayim. Now, okay, so the question is, everybody I've heard said it came from this piece by Smetana, 1874, the Moldau, Vltava, and very popular. And so somebody finally did some research. Turns out that the Hatikva melody is ours originally. It's a Jewish melody. It's not taken from the Czechs. It's the other way around. I just had to find this. I had to say it. 600 years ago, there was a Sephardi prayer for dew, the Tfilat Tal, 10 Tal. And so there was a melody for the Birkat Tal. And after the Inquisition, as Jews made their way out of Spain, it got its way into Italy, where it became a popular love song. Fuji, Fuji, amore mio, flee, flee, my love. Oh, so from Tfilat Tal, for the Jews, it became an Italian love song. Fuji, Fuji, all right, flee, my beloved. So now, then it became a Romanian gypsy folk song from the Italians, cart and oxen. And then somebody from Romania went and took the cart and oxen tune, this gypsy tune, which was an Italian tune, which was taken from Sephardic prayer, and set it to Hatikva. That's the origin. So how did it get to the Moldau? So he says, go back to Mozart. And Mozart heard the Italian tune, and then he put it into some of his music pieces that he did, and put that refrain into some of his music. And then Smetana picked it up from Mozart. All right, so it's really ours. So notice it's so very similar, right? It's the da 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 da. The key is different. The key is different. It's not, but and the rhythm is different. But you can see how close they are. So it turns out that it became associated with Tikva under the British occupation because they wouldn't allow Jews to play Hatikva. So they would play the Moldau instead of Hatikva. They would play that. Okay. So now you know the origin of Hatikva. Okay, there's the truth. Now I want to get to the okay. No, it changes. Now I want to go to my main theme. Let me move this out of the way, which is about Herzl. And I call him the unlikely Moses, because it's impossible that somebody like Herzl would have become a leader of the Jewish people. Absolutely impossible, given his personality, given his history, his background. You'll find out why. But as we talked about last time, we talked about the rise of Jewish nationalism, the rise of the idea of returning to the land of Israel. We have the beginnings already in the middle of the 1800s, like Sir Moses Montefiore, who was the Sheriff of London, Middlesex, a Sir and a first baronet, a very popular figure in England. And he establishes Mishkenot Sha'ananim in 1860. If you go to Jerusalem, you'll see these windmills. They were established under Montefiore in an attempt to allow a means of agricultural production for Jews, so they would move outside the walls and begin to resettle land, actually work the land. Well, there's another, before Mendelssohn, before Herzl, I mentioned last time about the founder of Marxism, not being Marx, but his friend Moses Hess, who left Marx and then went on to be the first speaker for Zionism. Well, there's another wannabe Moses. I'll just pull down this picture. You can see this fellow, this character, Lord Beaconsfield, Dizzy, the Israeli, Benjamin Disraeli, Prime Minister of Israel, the Jewish Prime Minister of Israel, by birth, Jewish by birth, not by religion, because his father had a fight with the synagogue, got upset and took his
Minister of England.
Huh? The Prime Minister of England. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, look what his name is, the Israeli. Who couldn't come up with a more Jewish name than the Israeli of Israel? Chancellor of the Exchequer, right? And he has, Disraeli starts to write some ideas about a plan of restoring the nation to Palestine. He says the country is admirably suited for them. Financiers from all over Europe would help because the port, that means the Sultan of Turkey is weak, and the Turkish landholders could be bought out. And he wrote a novel, Coningsby. He says that was a feeler. He was just beginning to develop his views. The man who should restore the Hebrew race to their country would be the Messiah, the real savior of the prophecy. And he hinted that he wanted to be that person. He hinted at it. And then he wrote, he said in an article entitled, "The Jewish Question is the Oriental Question," Orient meaning anything east of London in those days. The Oriental Question. Within 50 years, a nation of 1 million Jews would reside in Palestine under the guidance of the British. 1877, 50 years forward, you're right around the time of the beginning of the British Mandate. Not far off, not far off. There we go. Quite a dashing figure. Okay, so we have then 1881 with the pogroms in Russia, the rise of the first organized wave of Jews under the term Bilu, Beit Yaakov L'chu v'Nelcha, the house of Jacob's, let us go up and move forward. And that's out of Tsarist Russia. 1881, my great-great-grandfather, who was 81 at the time, decided he was going to move himself and his wife to the land of Israel and settle in Safed. Sold off everything, gave everything to his kids and his descendants, moved to the land of Israel, Safed. He died very shortly afterwards. He was murdered in his house by the neighbors, non-Jewish neighbors. That was the first interaction with the Palestinians of those times. My wife's great great grandfather also moved to Israel at the same time from Yemen because there was a wave of immigration from Yemen at the same time. They were catching on. Everybody was catching on to this theme. So we now, of course, like Jews, we're now coming to the idea of having a settlement in one land, one people, one land, but there are two, like all Jews, two routes. One was the cultural route. Asher Hirsch Ginsburg, known as Ahad Ha'am, is one of the folk. Yeah, one of the people. Hebrew essayist, and he actually opposed Herzl and Zionism. He said that was putting the cart before the horse. You don't just go in and set up a nation. You can't count on the colonial empires. You can't count on the Ottomans coming along with you. You certainly can't count on the native Arabs coming along with us on this. He said, let's go settle, build up a Jewish culture, a rebirth of a Hebrew culture, and a Jewish national culture with Jewish settlements, but not the politics of a settlement. And he had a certain number of followers. We might call him a founder of the idea of Judaism as a civilization, which became a basis for Mordechai Kaplan, who influenced modern American Judaism, for example. A great influence on that. And he's got some very, very memorable quotes. He says, what is national freedom if not a people's inner freedom to cultivate its abilities along the beaten path of its history, right? Jews should cultivate what we have, right? And then another, this one is a very beautiful one, you may have heard it. More than Israel has kept the Sabbath has kept Israel, right? It's right? Our observances is what has protected us as a people. The final one, the right place for the League of Nations is not Geneva or The Hague. He has dreamed of a temple on Mount Zion where the representatives of all nations should dedicate a temple of eternal peace. Only when all peoples of the earth shall go to this temple as pilgrims is eternal peace to become a fact. We're still waiting. It was a great deal. All this is, listen, the whole existence of the Jewish people is a result of dreamers. What can I tell you? So some of his cultural influence, here I have a picture here for you. Let me enlarge it. Ahad Ha'am visiting with Boris Schatz, who is the founder of the Bezalel School of Art. If we're creating a Jewish culture, we need art. Jewish art. We didn't have a history of art. Now we've got to recreate a history of art. So the setting backdrop of a picture of a weird character is called the Eternal Jew, Hayudi HaNitzchi. You know that in Yiddish and German is the Ewige Jude, right? It's taken from medieval legends that the Jew is damned to, or the wandering Jew, the Jew is damned to wander the earth without rest because he killed Jesus, right? So, but now it's taken around and turned around by a Yiddish play about the Jew who's been oppressed all these years. Then to turn it around again later on, the Nazis would turn it around, make a propaganda film against Jews with the title Ewige Jude, the Eternal Jew. Now, also an outcome of this, the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. That was the outcome also of his vision, the establishment of a center of Jewish academic learning. Today, it is, in 2015, is ranked 23rd out of 2,000 universities in the world. It goes up and down. It's number 25. This year was 50. But what's interesting is that as this ranking company is based in the United Arab Emirates and was a company was established by the Saudis to start ranking all the universities, because I think they want to decide we're going to send our students where we're going to send them. There is no Islamic or Arabic university in the top 100, 200, or 300. Jews got one on top, in the top tier. Okay. Half a billion or so, as opposed to 16 million, maybe. There's a picture from the founding, laying the cornerstone. Okay, so now let's get to this real Zionism with Herzl, political Zionism. The idea that it's not so much the sense as getting the world leadership to agree that there has to be a state for the Jews. Got to solve the Jewish problem. Nobody wants Jews. We got to solve the problem politically. And that is through this character, Theodor Herzl, born in 1860 in Budapest, moves to Vienna, dies in Erlach, Austria, right? A pure Yeke German Jew, or that's the Austrian kind. The Austrian kind is a little bit more gemütlich, a little bit more Viennese waltzy, cultural, not quite so stuck up, but he is a member, right, let's see something about this, taken from a summary of a novel not a novel, I'm sorry, biography by Amos Alon, a very well-known Israeli writer. And this fellow summarized it, but basically, Herzl's a writer, a master of the German language, a member of a Teutonic College fraternity. What it means, a member of the fraternity, you were in the dueling club, you were swordsmanship, right? Doesn't sound very Jewish. He's a Jew by birth, but he's over it. He doesn't have his son circumcised. A rabbi comes to visit him one day in December. He's lighting the Christmas tree. But that's European Jews actually did like Christmas trees. Russians for sure, right? In Russia, because you couldn't light anything else. You weren't allowed to light anything, but it was New Year's. Right? So it was New Year's, right? So the truth was, Christmas became a generic. Nobody was Christian, nobody was Jewish, nobody believed either. So it was just generic. He's a proud citizen of a great polyglot power, that is the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Jews are emancipated, actually very good conditions in Austro-Hungary for Jews. They fit in, they're moving up in the world, right? That's, you could move, you could make your way up in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, you really could. In the capital and in the countryside, supposedly. But the country is beginning to decline. As it's at the peak of its power, it's also declining and breaking up into constituent parts. You have Germans and Czechs don't get along, and the Hungarians and Poles don't get along. It's conservatives, socialists, anarchists, and then there are the Jews, or there's the Jewish problem, which is a burning preoccupation in Vienna. And so you've got prosperous Jews in Vienna, and soon the problem was going to be solved. They don't understand why they're becoming the focus of anxiety. And Jews are baffled and shocked by this obsession. Should they react to the attacks or ignore them? And many sensitive Jews were tormented by these questions. Well, Herzl's in the intellectual circles. In the intellectual circles, you make fun of the rich, you make fun of the poor. We're the elites. We know what we're doing, we know our thinking, and so on. Right from the Neue Freie Presse, it's the #1 newspaper, written by careful Jews, celebrated for their brilliance, hampered only by their social aspirations, and he says the author said they were wrong in everything. And Herzl's plays are produced in Berlin and everywhere, in big places. And what they discover is that society is preoccupied with the bad manners of the Jews. What do you mean, bad manners of the Jews? Jews are obnoxious. Jews are pushy. Jews are querulous. You hear this all the time. And then you get books appearing to analyze the Jews' warped character, like a book, and they're considered scientific Jews based on skull shape and facial categorizations and so on. Eugene During's The Jewish Question as a Racial, Ethical, and Cultural Question. Right? These are beginning to appear. And eventually, Jews begin to absorb this into their own psychology. So there's a fellow, Otto Weininger, who's a young startup psychologist. And he, just as an aside, this is my notes, he said, the Jews are worse than women. He says, the Jew is a force that exists within the whole people, not just individual Jews. And why is it? Because the woman at least believes in the male, while the Jew believes in nothing. Hence, Jews gravitate towards communism, anarchism, materialism, empiricism, and atheism. So this Weininger himself had converted to Protestantism because he wanted something to hold on to, and Jews didn't believe anything, at least the ones that he knew. And then he took it to its logical conclusion, at age 23, committed suicide. So that's the only way to solve his Jewish problem. Okay, so there's a problem in the Jewish intellectual, the Jewish elite, of dealing with myself. So Jews, there were Jewish scholars who adopted this scientific anti-Semitism and biological inferiority. And somebody once wrote, he says, anti-Semitism did not succeed until the Jews began to sponsor it. We sometimes prompt our own downfall. And then Viennese politicians understood this is very effective as a tool. They use the word they do this, they do that, meaning you know who they are. Later on in the Soviet Union, they said the ruthless cosmopolitan, I meant Jews. You don't say Jews, you say ruthless cosmopolitans. And the most adept of this breed is Karl Lueger. Lueger is the mayor of Vienna. And he uses hatred of the Jew to get into power. Oh, his friends are Jewish. Don't bother me with, politics is politics. And so he says, I declare who is a Jew. That's his famous line, right? So we know the people who ride the anti-Semitic wagon very often couldn't care less, but it's a great tool. So Herzl is beginning to see this, as he's the correspondent for the Neue Freie Press, and he goes to Paris. He's their correspondent, of course. He's in Paris, land of democracy, land of fraternité, égalité, liberty, equality, and fraternity. Liberté, égalité, fraternité, right? Laïcité, all that stuff. And he sees they're still very anti-Semitic. And he begins to discover that anti-assimilation wasn't solving the problem. Right? And we need to do something organized. Right? He's just beginning to get these ideas in his head. And then he goes through the Dreyfus Affair, 1895. So very briefly, l'affaire Dreyfus, Dreyfus Affair, a Jewish officer, very proud to serve in the French army. He is the most outstanding student of his class. He's recognized as an outstanding intelligence, but they don't like his personality. He's grating personality, that's it. But there's they discover secrets have been passed on to the Germans. It's only a few years after the Germans have beaten the French to a pulp. And so there's a lot of resentment, and anybody who would transfer information to the Germans certainly would be sentenced to death, possibly. So they accuse him of treason, passing on without any trial. The trial is secret. They publicly strip him of his rank, send him to Devil's Island, French Guiana. And he insists on his innocence. He insists on his loyalty to France. I swear I'm innocent. Long live France. Long live the army. So he believed in the idea of France, but the French didn't. The military and the French didn't. So a Lieutenant Colonel Picard found out that really the traitor was a Major Esterhazy, who had submitted the secrets. But Picard was transferred to Tunisia to keep him silent, right? Don't rock the boat. Esterhazy was tried and found not guilty in a secret court-martial, and then he left the country. So they gave Dreyfus a second trial after knowing the events, and they declared him guilty again, even though they knew his innocence. Right? It was very clear. They couldn't admit that they had ramrodded. We know these government bureaucracies will never bend unless they're forced to when they're caught with their pants down. That's very characteristic of government bureaucracies. It's true of private corporations too. Finally, in 1906, I had to go through about over 10 years of turmoil. He was cleared and reinstated into the army. Now, this idea that with all the ideals of France, there are Jews in France rather than Frenchmen of the Mosaic persuasion, it still goes on till today. The great de Gaulle, I'll tell you a interesting personal story. The hero of the French resistance against Germany. I lived in Israel 1 year in an apartment right above the founder of Israel's Ben-Gurion Medical School, University Medical School. He's one of Israel's most famous physicians, Moshe Privis. And during World War II, he had been drafted in the Polish army as a doctor, ended very quickly, was captured. The Soviets took him behind lines because they didn't want the Polish army hanging around, sent the Polish army out to Siberia before they sent them back in when they were ready for them. And there were some French officers that had also been captured maybe there was a contingency, something like that, and they were also in Siberia, and they were very ill. They were falling deadly ill. He treated them, saved their lives. Years later, he comes back, he settles in France, and de Gaulle gives him an award, Knight of the French Legion of Honor. So he tells me that de Gaulle was giving out all the honors. When he came to place the honors on the doctor, he muttered, so he could be heard, that something like, couldn't they find somebody other than a Jew to give the award to? And this is de Gaulle who was against anti-Semitism, okay? So stuff is deep. So Herzl comes up with several plans. First one is, we'll march all the Jews to the big cathedral in Vienna. All the Jews, we'll line them up. We'll have them all dunked, tauchen, dunked, baptized. Jews are Catholics. That's it. End of the story. Mass conversion. Then it wouldn't work. So his next idea was, having grown up with the fraternity societies and dueling clubs. Dueling is the way you find your honor. We'll fight to the death. I'll challenge the anti-Semites to personal duels. He says after half a dozen duels between Jews and the anti-Semites, this is 1893, it would raise the social position of the Jews. We would stop being the wimps. We show that we stand up for ourselves. He alone unaided would challenge one of the three most influential leaders of Austrian anti-Semitism to a duel. And if he dies, he would be a martyr in the duel, his death a proof of Jewish honor. Or if it fails, when brought to trial for murder, he would give a speech to compel them to respect his nobility and to understand the horror of anti-Semitism. Right. You saw the play Hamilton, right? How's he die? In his honor. The honor was impinged. That's how you do it. We're going to defend the Jewish honor. Okay, finally, he realized the only solution would be for the Jews to organize an immigration to a state of their own, creating all the machinery of a state, even before there were really Jews present. So he starts running around to the Jewish community, goes to Baron de Hirsch, who was financing some of the projects in Israel and also in Argentina, wouldn't listen to him about it. He issued then a pamphlet called Der Judenstaat, the Jewish State, 1896 in Vienna. And he summarizes the plight of the Jews. Nobody can deny the gravity, right? The phrase, don't buy from Jews. And he goes over and summarizes, right? In Russia, imposts levied on Jewish villages. In Romania, few persons put to death. In Germany, good beating occasionally. Austria, anti-Semites exercise terrorism all over. Algeria, traveling agitators. Paris, Jews are shut out. Let's see something like that. Okay, yeah.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
in Russia, the Tsarist Strasser used to say, "Wen das Passayer see, kill the Jew,
Save Mother Russia. Right, that's it. But it's not, so he's saying it's everybody. Even the ones who like us don't like us. So, yeah. So he says, isn't it true that in countries where live in perceptible numbers, the position of Jewish lawyers, doctors, technicians, teachers, employees of all descriptions become daily more intolerable? The Jewish middle class seriously threatened. It's not just the passions that are against our wealthy. Is it not true the passions of the mob are against our wealthy? Is it not true our poor endure great sufferings more than any other proletariat? Right? It's causing distress in the upper class, the middle class, and the downtrodden. Finally says what they mean by it. Tell us in one word. In Berlin, they say Juden raus, out with the Jews. So take the hint. They want us out, let's get out. So you realize it's not a religious solution, not a social solution, but a national question. Getting some questions here. Yeah. Right. I'll go. Rosa's asked me some questions about, why wouldn't you want to convert? Well, that's why he dropped his plan. It wouldn't work. And then de Gaulle was weird. De Gaulle sponsored Israel, supported Israel until the Israelis didn't take his advice, and then he turned against Israel. A little bit weird as a personality. I think his allies found that when they were fighting in World War II also. So he goes, and the Jews think he's crazy in Central Europe. The chief rabbi suggests he goes to see a psychiatrist. His friend, his physician says, go see a psychiatrist. Only one person believes him at the beginning, a Christian minister. He's the chaplain to the British embassy in Vienna, William Heckler. He was a Zionist before Herzl. In 1884, he already started to preach the Jews should be able to return to the land of Israel. So he meets Herzl, he's enthusiastic about him, and because he's involved with the government, he makes an arrangement for Herzl to meet the Grand Duke Friedrich I of Prussia, Germany. And so Heckler brings Herzl to a private audience, and this is the first time he can talk to a major political figure about his political solution to the Jewish problem, and it's a leading member of the German royalty. He is the uncle of the Kaiser. Here, and okay, this is the tombstone, by the way, for Reverend Heckler. And his last line, has God rejected his people? By no means. Taken from the Christian scriptures. He's telling our Christians, God never rejected the Jews. We may have had our disputes, but he never rejected the Jews. Here's his description. Lover of God, his word and his ancient people. Tireless adversary of anti-Semitism, friend and counselor of Theodor Herzl. So, let's go ahead. All right? So that was the Grand Duke. The second convert then, so we've got the minister. Second one is the Grand Duke. Friedrich I, Grand Duke of Baden. He likes Hechler's theology about the end of days and the Jews as part of God's plan restored the land of Israel. And he likes Herzl's practical solution through the restoration of Jews to Palestine. So he becomes an advocate of Herzl for the rest of his life, supports Zionism. And he now introduces his nephew to Herzl, Kaiser Wilhelm II, notorious Kaiser of World War I, Kaiser Wilhelm. There's the Duke, nice dignified Iron Cross, classical German Junker, nobility. And so now we get the next convert. It's the German Kaiser. That's it. Okay, we'll get to this later. The German Kaiser. So the Kaiser is now going to get into the fray. The Kaiser is contacting the Sultan of Turkey, the Ottoman Sultan, says the Jews should have a settlement. We'll have the Jews finance your empire. Your empire is sinking. They know that. They called the Turks the old man of Europe or the sick man of Europe. It was waiting to be killed off. They did a good job fighting, killed off Armenians in the process, but they were the sick man of Europe. So, but the Sultan refused. He could not, I guess, as the leader of the Muslim world, see himself authorizing a Jewish settlement in its own, in the historic land of Israel. There's no Palestine yet. It doesn't exist in the map. That's a word the British pull up. Or, people in that period. There's dashing Kaiser Wilhelm. Handsome young lad, I guess, at that time. So Herzl was getting politicians behind him, but not the Jews, the powerful Jews of Central Europe. But in East Europe, it was picking up steam. Because in East Europe, the condition was obviously intolerable. So he creates the first Zionist Congress, 1897 in Basel, gets 200 representatives from all over the Jewish world, Orthodox, atheists, businessmen, students of all kinds, to create a publicly guaranteed homeland for the Jewish people. He creates a Zionist organization. Herzl's the president. Okay, later on he writes a novel, Vision of a New Jewish State, Alt Neuland. He doesn't get anywhere with the Sultan. As I said, the Sultan could not see himself as the leader of the Muslim world authorizing a Jewish settlement. So he then turned to the British with a new idea. How about the Sinai Peninsula? Because that part was under the British, not under the Turks. Egypt was under British rule at that time. It was semi-independent, but under British control. Sinai Desert, it's empty, nobody's there. How about letting the Jews settle there? Well, the British didn't like that, but they suggested, said, how about Uganda? It's way down there, nobody will bother you. There are no anti-Semites in Uganda. They don't know what Jews are. Nobody's going to go for you. And Herzl was so desperate because they saw that the end was coming for the Jews of Europe. He sensed that. So anything to get the Jews out. But the idea that when he proposed it to the other Zionists, one of the members of the Congress was almost assassinated, actually. He pulled out a gun and shot at somebody. So that didn't work. It's land of Israel. Nothing else will help. And he couldn't resolve the conflict. And he himself died shortly afterwards, the age of 44, right? He didn't live to see anything happen. But before he died, he did get fifth convert. And eventually he would get number 6 also, who would prove to be the most valuable converts to Zionism. And it would be David Lloyd George. Forget Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary Balfour. It's George, the Prime Minister, who is the man who pushes for the idea of a Jewish settlement. Even before he became Prime Minister, before World War I, he was a legal advisor to Herzl. And he was the one who cooked up the idea about Uganda. He thought that might be a temporary solution. And he was very proud about the Balfour Declaration. He wrote about this or spoke to this to the English Zionist Federation later on. I was Prime Minister of this country when the idea of the Jewish national home took form as an act of state policy in the Balfour Declaration. I presided over the councils of the Imperial Cabinet, which gave expression to the policy and secured for it the sanction of our allies. I was the principal delegate of the British Empire at San Remo, where the mandate for Palestine received its final shape and was conferred upon Britain. So it is this fellow who becomes a Zionist, not because it would help the United States enter World War I. I mean, there were some who said, as long as the Russians were in the war, the American Jews would block entry into the war. This would help compensate. No, it wasn't that. It's because he was a Zionist. Why was he a Zionist? And by the way, here he got another Renaissance. This is after Herzl died, but another great convert, and that is Winston Churchill, who loved Jews. He did what he could. So both Churchill and Lloyd George were the odd men out. Think of it in the English in the UK. George was a Welsh nationalist. He was a Welsh speaker. He understood as a member of a minority nation what it's like to be a minority nation. He took it to heart. Churchill was half American. So he's also sort of sometime on the outs of the British royalty, even though he's royalty, right? He's a half American. So he also is a little bit on the outs. And I think both of them had that instinctive sentiment of identifying with somebody else on the outs. So here we've got the two of them together, walking down the street. Okay. And we got one more convert. And it's also after Herzl. And that is Hussein bin Ali, the Sherif of Mecca. The royal authority, the religious authority of Mecca, the sacred city of Islam, king of the Hejaz. Hejaz is the core of Arabia. The best parts of Arabia is Hejaz. And that way, at least he was king until the Saudi family took over. They're upstarts. He's the actual descendant from Muhammad. And his son, the Emir Faisal, leads the revolt, the great Arab revolt against the Ottomans in World War I. If you remember Lawrence of Arabia, that's that family. His other son, Abdullah founded Transjordan, now Jordan, right? They got the lion's share of the mandate of Palestine because they owed it to him. So Hussein, Sherif of Mecca, was not disturbed by the Balfour Declaration. And in March 1918, he wrote in Al-Qibla. Qibla means the prayer direction to Mecca. It's a daily paper. It says Palestine was a sacred and beloved homeland of its original sons, the Jews. Here's the man in charge of the holiest site of Islam saying this is the beloved homeland of its original sons, the Jews. A return of these exiles to the homeland will prove materially and spiritually an experimental school for their Arab brethren. They called on the Arab population of Palestine to welcome the Jews as brethren, cooperate with them for the common welfare. Think of what would have happened had he been able to stay in the position as Sherif of Mecca. So, our honorary Zionist, the Sherif of Mecca. I had to add him. Finally, the famous last words of Herzl, as he writes in his diary, if I had to sum up the Basel Congress in one word, which I shall not do openly, would be this: at Basel, I founded the Jewish state. If I were to say this today, I would be greeted by universal laughter. In 5 years, perhaps, and certainly in 50, everyone will see it. Indeed, 50 years. 50 years. Pretty good move, okay? The most unlikely man who gets support from the most unlikely places and changes the course of Jewish history. Okay. Go ahead.
What was missing on the story? Somebody did a census of who was living in Palestine, Israel, in the 1900s, 1814. What was the population of that area?
Yeah, but that's very well known. Yeah, it's been recorded. What happened? It's the population, both Arab and Jewish population went up and down for a variety of reasons. But apparently in the 1700s, there were some wars going on that devastated the land, devastated the population. By the time you get to the beginning of the 1800s, all the populations were down, both Jewish and Muslim and Christian, very far down. There was in the 1830s an attempt at a rebellion by local Palestinians against, I don't know if it was, I think it was under the Egyptian rule at that time. Didn't get very far, but they did attack, and there was a massacre of Jews. Of 500 Jews were killed at that time, 1830s. That's before the Zionist invasion. I don't remember if it was in Safed at that time. I don't remember the location. Big, huge massacre over the course of a month. And, but in general, yeah, all the populations were low. We find a regrowth of Arab population in areas where Jews were settling. Why in areas where Jews were settling? Jews were buying, Jews were hiring, Jews were employing. And so you got jobs, you move. So it's not just, you have, we know for sure, there are families coming in from what's called Haran, Syria area, Haruni. We have coming in from the Sinai. Many of the Gazans carry names like Masri and so on, indicating their Egyptian origins. Obviously, there's also a core of Palestine Arabs. But that population grows. Yeah, there are more Palestine Arabs in the Palestine area than Jews, but that number is growing exponentially as Jews are coming in. There's a reason to grow. And also their life expectancy is increasing. Their life expectancy was zilch. As Jews are coming in, there's prosperity, life expectancy is going up. Yeah.
So in the 1800 to 1920, this population came from Russia.
So the largest bulk, yeah, 1880 to 1920, yeah, the largest bulk would be in Eastern Europe, Russia, coming in. 1930s, you get the wave of German Jews, big waves of, you have waves of Jews constantly also still from Yemen coming in, North Africa and so on, smaller numbers at that time still. But as the situation gets worse in Arab countries, those numbers increase. So of course, with the rise of Israel, then you have a mass expulsion, a mass flight of all Jews from Arab lands from 1948 into 1960, 61. All right? Massive expulsion. So that today it's probably about half Jews are from Arab lands by origin, Arab or Muslim countries. Yeah. All right. So, any other questions? Yeah. Oh, lunch is served. Kiddush. Okay. So everybody, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
All
Shalom.
of you online and watching us, Shabbat Shalom.